This video is going to go over slopes of parallel and perpendicular lines and how to determine whether two equations are parallel or perpendicular. We first need to go over some vocabulary. The slope, remember, is the steepness of a line. Parallel lines are lines that never touch, and there's an example there beside there. Perpendicular lines are lines that cross and form a 90-degree angle. And remember, a 90-degree angle is here in the corner. All of these are 90-degree angles. Those are 90 degrees. So those lines are perpendicular. Now, when talking about parallel lines, again, parallel lines are lines that are always the same distance apart and never intersect. Since the equations of the lines below are already in slope-intercept form, it is easy for us to find the slope and the y-intercepts of each line. Remember, slope-intercept form is y equals mx plus b, where m is the slope and b is the y-intercept. Okay? Now, when looking at our lines below, lines 1 and 2, we have the y, we have slope, and we have the y-intercept. So here's our slope, and here's our y-intercept. Now, when we're trying to figure out whether or not lines are parallel or perpendicular, parallel lines have the same slope. So to be parallel, they must have the same slope. So when we're looking at our y equals mx plus b, the m is the slope, so our 3x here is the slope of line 1, and 3x is the slope of line 2. So these two equations have the same slope, so they are parallel. So these lines are parallel because they have the same slope. These two slopes are identical. Now if we would graph these two lines, here's a graph of these two lines. The slope, remember, is rise over 1, so it's 3 over 1. So both of these lines have a slope of 3 over 1. Up 3 over 1, up 3 over 1. And so does the next line. Up 3 over 1, up 3 over 1. So they both have the same slope. And you can see that they are parallel. So the thing to remember is that parallel lines, again, have the same slope. Now, if we were given lines 1 and 2, 2x plus y equals -3, and 4x plus 2y equals 8. Are these lines parallel? Well, the first thing that we need to do is, number 1, is we need to change it to slope-intercept form. So y equals mx plus b. Okay, and then we have to look at the slopes to determine. So those are our steps. Change to y equals mx plus b, and then look at the slope. So if we want to change 2x plus y equals -3 into slope-intercept form, we're going to do this down here at the bottom. 2x plus y equals -3. So remember, we're trying to get our y by ourselves, so we're going to get rid of this 2x. So we're going to minus 2x from both sides. So we're left with y equals -2x minus 3. Okay, so this equals y equals -2x minus 3. Now let's figure out 4x plus 2y equals 8. We need to put this in slope-intercept form. So 4x plus 2y equals 8. We're trying to get our y by ourselves, so we're going to get rid of that 4x. So we're going to minus 4x from both sides. Okay, now we have 2y equals -4x plus 8. Well, our y is still not by itself, so we need to divide that out because 2y means to multiply, so we're going to divide by 2. We have to divide everything by 2. So this cancels out, so we have y equals negative 4 over 2x. Well, we can simplify that as negative 2x plus 8 over 2, which 8 divided by 2 is 4. So here's our new equation, y equals negative 2x plus 4. Now, let's find our slopes of each line. So in the first one, our slope is negative 2x. Remember that negative sign needs to go with the slope. In our second equation, negative 2x is the slope. So to be parallel, they have to have the same slope. So they do have the same slope. So yes, they are parallel. Now let's look at these equations and these questions. What is the slope of the line for the equation? Y equals negative 2x plus 4. Well, the slope is the negative 2x. So negative 2x is the slope. What is the slope of the line for this equation? Y equals negative 2x minus 3. Remember, the slope is negative 2x is the slope here. So are the y-intercepts equal to one another? Well, our y-intercept in the first one is 4, and our y-intercept in the second one is 3. So the answer is no. Now, when dealing with parallel lines, these do not mean anything. We don't care about them. We only care about the slope. What is the y-intercept of the line for the equation? We already talked about that. It's 4. And the y-intercept for the second equation is negative 3. So these don't matter. We were just trying to trick you here. Those don't matter. So because these have the same slope, these two lines are parallel. Now, let's talk about perpendicular lines. We now know that to be parallel, they have to have the same slope. Well, in perpendicular lines, let's talk about these. Another relationship that lines can have is that they can be perpendicular, which means they will intersect or cross at a right angle. So let's examine two lines below that are perpendicular by examining their equations and then looking at their graphs. So look at these equations. Y equals negative 4 over 3x plus 3. Line 2 is y equals 3/4 x minus 2. Well, what do we notice about these lines? What do we notice about their slopes and their y-intercepts? So remember, to be in slope-intercept form, y equals mx plus b. Both of these equations are in slope-intercept form. So let's look at their slopes. This slope is negative 4 over 3, and this is a positive 3 over 4. Now, it's said up here that these lines are perpendicular. So we already know that they're perpendicular because the question told us that. So because we know that they are perpendicular, let's figure out what's different about them and what's the same about them. Well, first of all, I noticed that one's a negative and one's a positive. That's the first thing I notice. The second thing I notice is that they are different slopes based on that one's positive and one is negative. And also, one says 4 over 3 and one says 3 over 4. Well, they have the same numbers, but they're just switched around. And remember, that's called the reciprocal. Okay, that's called the reciprocal. So, to be perpendicular means to have a negative reciprocal. So, if you start out with this line, it's a negative 3 over 4. To make it the opposite, the one at the bottom has to be a positive of a reciprocal. So if it starts out a positive, it has to the reciprocal has to be negative. If it starts out as a negative, the reciprocal has to be positive. And you'll see that it's kind of confusing, but you'll see it as we go through. And remember, a reciprocal means just to flip it over. So let's look at this. If we're looking at this, just looking at it, this is negative 3 over 4. So a negative 4 over 3 changes to a positive 3 over 4. these numbers flip over and the positive and the negative switch around. So it became, this is a negative, and then this is a positive, and this is 4 over 3, and this is 3 over 4. They just switch around. Now let's look at their graph. Okay, well here's our graph. As you can see, they do cross, and they do have 90-degree angles. Okay, so this is negative 4 over 3, negative 4 over 3. That's the slope of the first line. The slope of the second line is 3 over 4, positive 3, positive 4. Okay, so positive 3, positive 4, positive 3, positive 4 over here. Okay, so those are the slopes of those two lines. And so these are perpendicular because they have a negative reciprocals. Now, are these lines perpendicular? Well, first of all, they need to be in slope-intercept form, so y equals mx plus b. So we need to figure this out. So 7x minus 2y equals negative 8. We need to get our y by ourselves, so we're going to take away 7x from both sides. Negative 2y equals negative 7x minus 8. We need to get rid of this negative 2. Okay, so that crosses out, so we have y equals negative 7 over negative 2. So negative 7 over negative 2 x minus negative 8 over negative 2, which would be a positive 4, because two negatives equal a positive. Alright, now the second line is 2x plus 7y equals 3. We're going to get rid of that 2x because we need to get our y by ourselves. Starting to get crooked. I'll try to straighten up. So we have 7y left, then minus 2x plus 3. We need to get rid of this 7. Alright, so now let's figure this equation out. The 7's cancel out, so we have y equals negative 2 over 7 plus 3 over 7. Now in the first equation, remember that two negatives make a positive, so these change to positive. So the first one is a positive 7 over 2. And the second equation is a negative 2 over 7. And remember, to be perpendicular, they have to have a negative reciprocal, and that means a flip. So first of all, the first one is a positive, the second one is a negative, so that's correct. And then a reciprocal is a flip. So 7 over 2 flips over to 2 over 7. So it is a reciprocal. So these lines are perpendicular. So those lines are perpendicular. Now, again, here are the questions that you ask if you want to know if they're perpendicular. Does the product of these two slopes equal negative 1, or are negative reciprocals? So we did do negative reciprocals. So then you say if they are negative reciprocal, they're not parallel, they are perpendicular. So again, the most important thing to remember is that it's a negative reciprocal. Okay, let's review really quick. Parallel lines have the same slope. Perpendicular lines have a negative reciprocal. So those are very important things to remember. Parallel lines, same slope. Perpendicular lines, negative reciprocal slopes. Hopefully this has helped you out in understanding parallel and perpendicular lines. If you still need help, go back through the lesson, watch the video again, or contact your teacher.